It has been a very busy couple weeks of planting. I managed to get everything into the ground. I planted a lot more this year in the garden, and I can't wait to see everything grow. Last year was my first year with the garden. I built it from scratch. When we moved in, there was no fence, no garden beds, no greenhouse, and no chickens. I spent months preparing our new land to build a permaculture food forest. Because it was my first year planting the garden, I mostly planted some veggies and herbs. We also planted berry bushes and a couple of trees. This year, I wanted to grow a lot more. We planted over 20 fruit and nut trees, added more berry bushes, more flowers, and medicinal herbs. There were also new vegetable varieties that I wanted to try. I applied my notes from last year of what worked and what didn't, and made a few adjustments, such as adding more ground cover and amendments to my soil. Getting my soil right is the main goal I have over the next few years. I plan on doing that by adding organic matter, compost, ground cover crop, not tilling, and using all natural homemade organic fertilizers and pest control. Most everything I set out to plant this year is in the ground, and I couldn't be happier. Now I just need to maintain, nurture the plants, and continue with my succession planting throughout the season. Wow, look at the comfrey. So I have comfrey plants that I planted last year all throughout my gardens, and they are just growing so amazingly well right now. Next to it, I planted some peppers, some pepper starts. I have a variety of different kinds that I'm trying this year for the first time, and I just used some sticks from the woods to act as a trellis. And then I built these. I have a couple of them in the garden to help trellis my tomato plants that I'm growing this year. And I'm growing a couple of varieties of tomatoes. I also added this tomato cage to my blackberries this year, because last year they were growing, and toward the end of the season they were out of control. I did not trellis them as I should have last year, so this year I'm trying this method to see how it does, and it seems to be responding very well. The other one's doing even better. That's a little higher ground that I'll show you in a little bit. I planted watermelon, and I'm also using the tomato cage as a trellis, and of course I'll let some of the vines carry throughout the garden a little bit as well, but I wanted to try and grow a little more vertical this year, so we'll see how that does. And in this bed I planted just a variety of different things. I have sweet Annie growing. As you guys know, I love the herb sweet Annie. So I'm growing a ton of that in my gardens, and I have some other things like amaranth, different types of amaranth growing in here. In this bed I have more celery, I have arugula, I have more sweet Annie, and different types of cucumbers up here that I'm growing on this trellis that I made. And I have a lot of just various forms of ground cover And I do let some weeds grow in my garden because a lot of the weeds that you will see throughout my garden are actually edible and in most cases even medicinal. So I don't view them as a weed that should be pulled necessarily unless it's impeding on a plant. So I typically let them be. I have some nasturtium growing throughout. This is some nasturtium here. I'm trying to do a lot more diversity in my garden beds. So I have a lot of things interspersed throughout. Also adding various herbs throughout the garden. I'm growing, oh look, it got really windy and it blew some of my hoop netting, the insect netting down. So I'm gonna have to fix that. It's really windy today. But in the hoop houses, I have a good majority of my brassicas. I'm trying to keep them protected this year because last year all of the cabbage worms just ate most of my brassicas. So I'm growing a variety of different things like kale, collard greens, broccoli. I'm growing some kohlrabi. I'm growing, let's see, what else? Just a variety of cabbages, pak choy, bok choy. So there's a variety of different things that I'm growing in these beds here. I still have some of the garlic that I started in the fall of last year that I need to harvest. So I will be harvesting a lot of that. The yellow flowers that you see are from the broccoli rabe that I planted in all of the beds. This is my other tomato trellis here for the two plants I have in the middle of the garden. It's pretty sturdy. I think it'll actually work pretty well. This is what I built last year as well for the tomato plants, and it seemed to hold pretty nice. And then I have, of course, from last year, my berry bushes that are coming back and doing just fine. I actually staked that one because it was kind of falling over. This is another watermelon. So this is our peach tree. So this is year one of the peach tree, and I planted a lot of strawberries down around the base, as well as some comfrey along the base of this tree. This is the other blackberry bush that we have growing in the garden. And then in these two center beds, just a variety of greens, arugula, kale, chard. I have carrots growing, turnips, beets. So there's a variety of different things growing in these two beds here. And you can already tell a lot of this is starting to grow pretty well. This is, I think, one of the first things I started this year in the garden were these two beds. And then, of course, on either side of these beds, I just planted these, and I'm really excited about these because these are Brussels sprouts. So I started these just last week. I planted them, and they have about 4 plants growing on either side. And so I cannot wait to see what these do this year. I hope that they're going to be okay throughout the hot summer season, but we'll see how they do. They take a long time to grow before they're ready to harvest at the end of the season. So I'm going to just keep an eye on them and make sure I'm taking care of them as best as I can because I'm excited for these to produce this year. And then I have raspberries along the side. We brought in 2 new raspberry bushes that I planted right in the center here. And then as they grow, I will be adding a trellis to stake these. We have more comfrey here that I also had to cut back a little bit. Radishes growing throughout the beds. I have fennel growing, nasturtium, zucchini plants in here as well, and some chard toward the end. And then in this bed, more comfrey. As you can see, this is where a good majority of the garlic is planted. And I also, of course, need to harvest that out, replace it with something else. I have quinoa growing that I'm trying out this year. More sweet Annie, fennel, chard, cilantro growing in this bed, as well as some kale, nasturtium. So as you can see, I try to just mix it up. That also helps with pest control also. That's a natural way to do it. So it kind of confuses the pests when you have just a big variety of different things in the garden growing together. In this bed I have okra planted. This garden is on a slope, so this is more drained soil. The further down you go, it is moist. It stays pretty moist. So I have a lot of the more water-loving veggies down on that end this year, and the others on this side. So we'll see how it does. I have a new tree planted. This is a dwarf mulberry. So I cannot wait to see what that's going to look like in a few years. And then I have just some more radishes, beets, turnips, carrots. I have milk thistle, fennel. I have celery, thyme, sage growing in this bed, a lot of herbs, parsley. I have, let's see, what else? There's so many different things. I have more nasturtium, kale growing here. On this end, this stuff that you see here, this is all ground cover. This is hairy vetch. So I grew this toward the end of the season last year to help protect the beds during the winter. And I'm just letting some of it grow, but I've been cutting a lot of it back. There's carrots in here. This is sorrel that came back from last year, and more sweet Annie. And then I have another watermelon plant that I'm trying on this side of the garden, the more well-drained soil side, to see how it does here versus the other end of the garden. And then this is elderberry. And then in the corner, I just planted Concord grape vine. So hopefully we'll begin to see that over the next several years develop. So that will be exciting to see this kind of run along the fence. And then over here, I'm trying corn this year for the first time. So I have corn growing with some cilantro, more comfrey. And then I have a variety of different things like carrots, turnips, beets, chard, cilantro growing in this bed, and some amaranth. And more amaranth growing over here with some sunflowers in the garden. This I'm really excited about because I started asparagus from seed, and I just transplanted this into the garden a few days ago, and I'm hoping that it will do well here. But asparagus takes a long time to grow and develop before it's ready to harvest, so I won't even really begin to harvest anything from these plants until maybe year 3, year 4. So it takes a long time. So I'm going to keep it here and see how it does, and just keep taking good care of it. I have more of our blueberry bushes here, another elderberry over here, and then I just planted on the moon arbor, I planted some passion flower. This I had close to the house. last year, and it just took over. So I knew it would be perfect here on the moon arbor so that it can have the space to just climb. So it's already starting to do that, and pretty soon it'll have just beautiful flowers that are also very medicinal. So I'm excited about that. This right here is what we're using to try and control some of the moles that we have. We have a mole problem here on our land, and we have a couple of these set up. One I put in the garden to try and keep that under control in the garden space. But this I got from Layman's, and it seems to be working okay. I haven't seen as much mole activity in the actual garden, so hopefully that's going to continue to work for us. But it sends vibration down into the ground, which the moles do not like. So this is working okay, but it only covers up to about 2,000 square feet of space. So I feel like our property, which is obviously nearly 4 acres, to do the whole thing, we definitely need to add more. But I wanted to start with these 2 just to see how they work for us, and see if that would be a better long-term investment for us to actually add more of these. And lastly, I started beans this year. This is the first time I've had beans in my garden. And these beans, I got the seeds from a fan of the channel. His family has been growing them every year in their gardens. And so I was lucky to receive this as a gift and started the beans. And as you can see, they're starting to grow. He said that they definitely do grow very well. And so I'm looking forward to seeing these grow on this teepee here that I made out of bamboo. So I'm excited to watch this. I am planning on adding more medicinal herbs throughout the garden just to kind of fill up even more space. But as you can tell, things are really filling out more this year because I added a lot more this year. And outside of this fenced in garden, I also have a couple beds that I actually planted a lot of medicinal herbs in, such as skullcap, St. John's wort, motherwort. I added self-heal and a lot of other medicinal herbs. So I'm excited to see that develop this season, if the chickens can stay out of it, because they've been getting into the bed. It's not fenced off. I'm debating whether or not I need to do that because they do tend to have free roam, free range on this property, and they can be a little bit destructive at times. So hopefully I can keep that under control this year. I was eager to catch a local bee swarm with the new trap I recently put up, but instead it was raided by carpenter ants. We had to take the trap down, clean it out, and put it back up again. I also freshened up the lemongrass oil to attract the bees. Hopefully, I'll catch a swarm soon. We had a few days in a row of heavy rain, so it really put our recent excavation work to test. A lot of our pasture was underwater every time we got heavy rain, but after expanding the creek and adding some new trenches, it seems to have worked. The water is flowing as it should, and we didn't have any flooding. The real test will be next year after the snow melts, just at the turn of the season as we begin to transition into spring. Seeding and planting the garden has been a lot of work, but I'm enjoying every moment of it. There's nothing like getting outside when the weather begins to get warm. Feeling the sun kiss your skin, the wind blow through your hair, smelling the earth and fresh air, hearing the birds sing, and listening to the trees blow in the wind. Out here, time stands still. This is the place I go to when I feel overwhelmed by what's happening in the world. This is where I go when my mind is racing with all the things I have to get done. This is where I go to come back to myself, to feel peace and to be reminded of the beauty that is in this world. Life can feel so complicated and heavy sometimes, but nature seems to have it all figured out. Everything intuitively knows exactly what to do. And it all seems to come back to life year after year with the help of every species that crosses its path and every element in its environment. Nature is a constant that is ever changing, but does so in a rhythm, a cycle, with reason and purpose. It's such a magical and complex system made simple. Just like our bodies, a complex system made simple. The plants need sunlight, good clean soil, and water to thrive. And so do we. Such basic needs, simple. I don't know about you, but there's comfort in that for me. Life doesn't have to be so hard. We don't have to make it feel so hard. And we don't have to be hard on one another. If we support one another instead of tearing each other down, imagine the kind of magic and beauty we would see in this world.